Hi there, and welcome to Baseball by Design. I am Paul Caputo, sportslogos.net minor league baseball correspondent, broadcasting live, as always, from the Helmet Sunday Hall of Fame in my basement in Fort Collins, Colorado. On this episode, we're going to be talking about the Fort Wayne TinCaps, who are a High-A affiliate of the San Diego Padres. I'm going to be speaking later on in this episode with Tiffany Chen of the design firm Sky Design. I'm going to be speaking with Logan Wiening of the Old Fort Baseball Company. And I'll also be speaking with Bob Dispenza, who is a historian with Allen County Parks in Fort Wayne, Indiana. So right now, I'm very happy to be joined by Michael Limmer, who is the vice president for marketing with the Fort Wayne TinCaps, who started with the team way back when they were the Fort Wayne Wizards. Michael started in 1999 as an intern with the team and has been with the team for most of that time since then. Michael, thank you so much for joining me.
Happy to be here.
Oh man, this is a fun team. And like I said, this is at the time of this recording, we are going to the Fort Wayne TinCaps as part of our Baseball Palooza trip. When this drops, we will have been to the Fort Wayne TinCaps. So there's going to be some verb tense challenges for me as we talk about this, as this drops in the future here. First of all, let's just start with the Wizards. There's a great history with the Apple logo and the TinCaps, but the fact that the team was the Wizards before they rebranded as the TinCaps. What was the significance of the Wizards name that they had from 1993 until 2008?
Well, I think the best answer to that is there really wasn't any significance. I think the biggest thing that came, again, I wasn't with the team when they moved from Kenosha, Wisconsin. They were the Kenosha Twins. They moved to Fort Wayne in 1993 into Memorial Stadium, which had just been constructed. I think from talking with the folks that were here in 93, when I got here in 99, was the alliteration. The fact that it was Fort Wayne Wizards. It was a W into a W. At the time, there wasn't a Washington Wizards. There wasn't a Kansas City Wiz, which was the first soccer team that was in Kansas City. So Wizards was unique in the sports landscape, but it was not unique or had any sort of local connection to the city of Fort Wayne. And I think even over the time that we used it as the Wizards, it never really gained traction as something that even the community really felt was their own. And so I think that really gave ourselves the opportunity as we were transitioning from Memorial Stadium into a downtown ballpark in Parkview Field in 2009 to really say, is Wizards the best name to continue with moving forward? And is there a better option?
Sure. So in 2009, you really delved into, you went from having essentially no local connection to this really fun hyper local connection. The two things that I've noted about Fort Wayne, Indiana, in terms of the history as it relates, well, not as it relates to baseball, but just in general, the first professional baseball game was played there in 1871.
Yeah. And
then of course the history that you decided to go with was, this history of John Chapman, aka Johnny Appleseed, who a lot of people I think is sort of a legend, right? But is actually a real person, a real human being who is buried in Fort Wayne, Indiana. So what made you decide to tap into the history of Johnny Appleseed to build a baseball brand around?
Well, I think when we started the whole process of, hey, if not the Wizards, then what? We just looked and said, okay, well, we looked around the landscape of minor league baseball. And at the time, and even still today, teams like the Montgomery Biscuits, the Lansing Lugnuts, being able to be self-referential, being able to be self-deprecate, like we wanted something that connected with the community, but also was fun and different and unique. Something that this community could own. And we wanted to give this community the opportunity to have something that they could see a connection to. And also something that's family friendly, grandma, grandpa, all the way down to the young kids could be associated with. So we took several different tracks of, we did a rename the team contest. We got 2,500 submissions. And so we categorized them. Some of them they're historical. Fort Wayne was actually a fort. It was founded in 1794. General Anthony Wayne, whose nickname was Mad Anthony Wayne, was the primary name of the fort was named after him. So we're like, okay, there's all this historical things that went along with fort. So you could imagine the cannonballs, all that sort of thing. There was another one, Fort Wayne is known and has a history of invention. There are quite a number of things that random things, but a number of things that were invented in Fort Wayne: the gasoline pump, I think the washing machine, first video game, any number of things. So we're like, okay, there's fun things here. Philo Farnsworth, one of the first folks in terms of inventing a TV. He lived here amongst several other places, but Philo Farnsworth, Fort Wayne. And then one was the fact that we're, like many settlements, on the convergence of rivers. So there's two rivers joined together to form the Maumee River. The St. Mary's, the St. Joe form the Maumee. So it's something river related. So those were kind of the tracks that we were on. And then, John Chapman, Johnny Appleseed, was something that every school in town here does, I think in first or second grade, does like a section on Johnny Appleseed and John Chapman, the American folk history behind that person, that he was a real person, but then he got Disneyized in a animated movie that was, Johnny Appleseed. And in the movie, he's got a tin cooking pot on his head, so he didn't have to carry a satchel that had his seeds and his Bible in it, and then he walked around barefoot. And that was like the quintessential imagery of Johnny Appleseed. We also know that every year in Fort Wayne, there's a Johnny Appleseed Festival that takes place at Johnny Appleseed Park, and it draws over 300,000 people. It's an all-day Saturday, all-day Sunday. It's old-timey. Everything is late 1700s dressed, and they've got all the sort of cooking going on and wood carving demonstrations and all. I mean, it is amazing. It's our family's favorite thing to do every year. So it's certainly something this community knows and is a part of the fabric. And it's Johnny Appleseed Park is where John Chapman's grave site is. There's several other locations that claim that that's where John Chapman is buried, but that's kind of part of the fun and intrigue of American folk hero, is that there's alternate claims for site. But Fort Wayne knows that it's at that location.
Definitely Fort Wayne.
Yeah. So we're like, okay, we could do something fun with that. And it's something that's already known, and we're like, should we be the Apple Seeders? And then we're like, well, we got to stay away from Apple, because Apple Computer, they're going to protect all kinds of copyright and trademark stuff, anything associated with that. So then one of the names of that 2,500, as we're going through and looking at specifically the Apple kind of theme, was the TinCaps. And we're like, well, baseball players, their headgear that's what they're known for. It's called a baseball cap. Even if someone's quarterback's wearing it on the sideline of an NFL game, it's a baseball cap. They're a football player. It's not a football cap. So we're like, well, they always wear their baseball cap when they're playing. And Johnny Appleseed, even though it was folklore, he always wore his tin cooking pot on his head when he moved around. So he's like, he wore his tin cap just like our players will wear their caps. And then it kind of formed from there. It's like, well, we want an apple. We want that to be tied in. We're going to put the tin cap on top. And if I could tell you how many different angles and shapes and sizes and thickness and apple that looked, all the design process was fantastic, but also frustrating of like, that looks too much like a tomato. That looks too much like a this. But yeah, so when the tin caps kind of started to flesh out, and we're like, what's that quintessential logo on that hat going to be? Everything just kind of fell into place. And one thing that I felt cemented it for me, we were down to like 4 finalists for names, and we actually fleshed out logos for all 4 of the finalists internally. When I went online to see what URLs, website names were available, and the fact that tincaps.com was actually available, that signaled to me that it was unique, and that if a 7-letter URL was available, even in 2008 when we were going through this process, that meant that we had something that we could really own. And on top of the fact that the design we really loved and felt we could do a lot of things with, not only the logo, but also kind of the apple tree orchard, that sort of theme that we've been able to continue throughout the ballpark as well.
And that logo in 2009 was created by Sky Design in Atlanta. Sky without an E, not to be confused with Sky Dillon, who's doing designs now. That's Sky with an E. So what was the reaction when this, after having had the Wizards for, a decade and a half, when you unveiled this really family friendly brand, red and green with the complementary sort of Christmas colors, right? Like, and, the apple and the metallic letters, the letters look like they're cut out of tin. What was the reaction in the community to this pretty significant change in the tone of the brand?
Yeah. So kind of to set the scene, 2009, we launched it in October of 2008 in the fall, where the Wizards season had ended. And people knew we were going to be rebranding going into the new ballpark because we had already kind of determined that. This is before just the dawn of social media. Facebook was around, but just in its early stages, there was no. Twitter was really young, but nothing like it is now. The landscape is completely different. And then we had talked to our counterparts in Montgomery, and we had said, hey, how was the response to the biscuit? We talked to our friends in Lansing. What was the response to the lug nuts? And some of the teams that had great success in terms of selling merchandise and their communities were in love with their teams and the team name. And we said, what was the response when you guys originally unveiled? What should we be prepared for? And the overwhelming response was like, hold on to something, trust yourself, and be ready for a wave of initial wave of disappointment and disbelief that you would name your team something like that. And I was like, really? Like this, but this is great. Oh, you guys weren't the TinCaps, this is going to be awesome. And they're like, no, if you do something that's unique and something people haven't heard before, it's going to take a while for their brain to attach that association. They're like, plus you're going to be announcing a name and a logo out into the world, and it's not attached to anything. Like it won't be a TinCaps game. You're not going to announce it your first game. You're not announcing it when they walk into the new stadium and they see how you're using it on the video board and what the jerseys look like. They're just going to hear a name, especially then. Like they're not, unless they go to the newspaper or the evening news, they're not even going to see the logo. How would you? I mean, you're going to put it on your website, yes, but directing people to your website to see it, it's not like we could launch it and be like, oh, here it is on our Instagram account, here's on Facebook, everyone gets to see it. How does TinCaps relate? So one story Montgomery folks told us was they announced it at a music festival in Montgomery. They went up on stage in front of thousands of people, and I don't think they anticipated they're just going to get this huge roar. But the story that was shared with us was they announced the name, the new baseball team in Montgomery is going to be the Biscuits. And it was silent, like crickets. And then they said they heard someone from the back start to boo.
Oh.
And it was like, I was like, okay, I can brace myself for that. And then they said, yeah, then they went over to their merchandise booth that they had, and they sold like $10,000 worth of merchandise that day. And so I was like, okay, we're going to have to brace for this. So we announced the name, and it was interesting talking to folks I knew around town. They're like, all we heard was the name. Like we didn't see the logo because all people talking, oh, did you hear about the the new name? It's the Tin Cups. It's the TinCaps. What is that? What does that even mean? And people are like, oh, how is that going to strike fear into your opponents? And it's like, well, that's not the point. Like they're like, oh, it should have been the Generals. It should have been the Falcons. It should have been the River Raiders, whatever. And it's, again, those are all fine names. But the thing that I think we really took away from, the folks in our industry that we trust that had launched some really, unique names, is they're like, if you don't get a reaction when you announce it, then you've made a mistake. Because you could roll out with the Fort Wayne Generals, because you had General Anthony Wayne, who was the namesake of the city, and they'd be like, oh, that makes sense. And then you're not going to sell any merchandise, and you're not going to have any, there's plenty of Generals. The Harlem Globetrotters beat the Generals every single time they play. So we announced it, and it was exactly what they told us it was going to be. They said, we're like, we can't believe this. We have a Johnny Appleseed festival in Fort Wayne that I mentioned before. There was a historian that was like a live reenactor. Like at the festival, he would come out and do like a 20-minute talk about John Chapman. And they did a local TV station did an interview with him and said, what do you think about the name, an homage to John Chapman? And he literally said, and I watched this clip, it's still on YouTube somewhere. He's like, John Chapman would roll over in his grave if he found out that they were naming the TinCaps after him. And, he would not be proud of this at all. And so it was rough for a couple weeks. And then we started, rolling out some t-shirts, and we opened a store at the mall because at the time the ballpark wasn't completed yet. And people started seeing the gear and started seeing how the logo was going to be on hats. And fast forward to the end of 2009, and we had a season, and people could put the TinCaps in Parkview Field and everything together of how we were going to do it. We were the number one selling logo and brand in all of minor league baseball, and that was 160 teams at the time. So, we felt vindicated, not in a way of like proved anybody wrong, but we felt that we were in a good place with a unique brand, with a strong that people were going to come to understand how this all works together, and people don't say boo about it anymore. I think after that first year, they're like, yeah, I love going to TinCaps games, because it was associated with something now. It wasn't just this concept or idea or something they never heard before. So it was just an amazing process to go through. I think that there was several years where I just was like, I don't think I ever have to go through that again. Like, that was just a rough few weeks of folks saying there's still time to change it. You can go back. You could go to something boring and generic. There's still time.
So the brand has had staying power, right? You haven't had to consider going through that. It's been 13 seasons now with it. And we're in the 14th season with this brand, which in minor league baseball is kind of an eternity, right? In these days of sort of constant rebrands, the fact that you've had this brand for as long as you've had, and with the exception of some additional logos that you created in 2017 that we were talking about, some type-based logos based on apple peels. Those are really fun, but the main apple character and the type, based on metal cutouts has been around unchanged for, since 2009. And so obviously that speaks to the quality of a brand that at the time probably felt pretty wacky, but today feels more sort of like a time-tested classic.
Yeah, we're trying to find ways to double down on TinCaps. We love our primary red apple. We call him Red, like just in terms of like what his persona is. We've talked about the idea of even extending into, are there other, with so many varieties of apple, are there other members of the TinCaps family out there that could join him and still be the focus? He's still the lead singer of the band, but are there other things that can kind of flesh out, what the TinCaps are, and try, like you mentioned, in terms of some brand extensions that we did several years ago, to just kind of tie into the whole theme. There's trees and apples and apple peels and the TinCaps thing, and our mascot is Johnny, Johnny TinCap, and he's got that kind of barefoot tin cap on his head persona. So yeah, if anything, we've so much enjoyed what the TinCaps has been, but also we still look forward to what the TinCaps can be and will be in the future, and just finding ways to continue to supply things that still fall within that feel and brand and vibe and feeling that people have with TinCaps, and make it even bigger and better. So, that's really fun. You let your creativity kind of run when you've got such an ample opportunity to be creative within a space. And, I don't think we've done a couple like what ifs. What if we had, one of the names we talked about in 2008 was the Octane, Fort Wayne Octane. The rhyme scheme and the gasoline pump was invented here in Fort Wayne. But oddly enough, at the time in 2008 is when gas prices were all the way up to $5 a gallon. And we've hit that again here recently. Yeah. So we're like, I don't think we want that to be what we tied with. And Octane feels more in our minds, that'd be a great arena football team, Major League Lacrosse. It kind of had more of a hard chrome flame sort of thought.
I could see you guys doing like a like the Burlington sock puppets have sort of multiple sock puppet characters. The Florida Fire Frogs had different types of frogs. I could see you guys introducing alternate logos that were like a crab apple and a Granny Smith, or, like different, like you were saying, different kinds of apples. I mean, that seems like a fun possibility for expansion. Michael, I've kept you longer than I meant to, but very quickly, I wanted to ask you about one of the alternate brands that you guys did. You supported the AAGPBL, the All-American Girls Professional Baseball League Monument with, and you played as the Fort Wayne Daisies. Yep. That was really cool. How was that received, and what was the sort of impetus for that?
Well, Fort Wayne's got such a rich baseball history. The first professional baseball game was played here against Cleveland. We claimed the first night game here as well, even though there's another location that claims they were the first night game. But the Daisies, being part of that, a league of their own, really shined a light on that professional girls baseball league that really took off while World War II was going on, and a lot of Major League Baseball's biggest stars were fighting, for our country. The Daisies were just part of the community. There wasn't professional baseball here at the time, and they came in, and it was this Midwest vibe of teams playing against each other, and the community loved it. And there's still members of the community there's a few still remaining that played back in the 40s and 50s, but then the families still live in town, and there's granddaughters and grandsons and all those that's going on. So it's still part of the kind of fabric of Fort Wayne. And so, this year for us to go, all in on the Daisies, and we had former Daisies and players, invited them to come back, and they threw out a first pitch and got recognized and signed autographs for hours. It was just so fun to just the respect and recognition that they were able to have was tremendous. And so, the Fort Wayne Daisies is something that we'll continue to just embrace as part of baseball history. And I foresee us playing games as the Daisies, well into the future. And, something that we want to make sure that the folks that came before the TinCaps in this community that really created a baseball love here continues to live on. And those ladies that, played for the Daisies, certainly did that and played for the love of the game. And this community really rallied around them then and continues to want to support that as we move forward.
Michael, thank you so much. This has been so much fun to learn about this team. I'm so looking forward to getting to the ballpark. I keep hearing such amazing things about the ballpark that you have. I know we're going to be there on a busy night, and so we're looking forward to seeing a huge crowd. And just thank you so much for coming on and talking about the TinCaps and this fun brand and the fun history that goes into it.
My pleasure. I'm excited. I'm so proud of it, and proud to be just one small part of making it happen, and now trying to curate it and make sure it continues positively in the future. And we look forward to seeing you here soon and showing you around.
The Baseball Palooza guys will be there. Michael, where are you on Twitter?
Great. Yeah. M Lim, MLIMM on Twitter.
Okay.
Is where you can find me.
Fantastic. Thank you, Michael. This has been fun.
All right. Take care.
All right, everyone, welcome back. I'm very happy to be joined once again for the second time on the podcast by Tiffany Chen of Sky Design. Tiffany, thank you so much for coming back to talk to me.
Thanks, Paul. Good to see you again.
So the Fort Wayne TinCaps were the first minor league baseball logo that you all created. What were the challenges in creating, as an accomplished design firm that's done a lot of work in other areas? What were the challenges in creating your first minor league baseball logo?
Oh, that's a really great question. Prior to the TinCaps, Sky Design, we had a fair amount of experience with both professional, collegiate, and a little bit of minor league environmental graphics, exploring existing brands. How does that brand get translated into more temporary events like training weeks and training days and more permanent spaces? But this was our first endeavor into a full holistic brand that would also be implemented in a physical space. So besides the brand, we were also responsible for signage at the new stadium. How does it get extrapolated inside of the stadium and in specialty suites? And from a conceptual approach, it was very similar to other projects in that we treated it as a boutique project, it was, as we approach every project, we think of it as singular and independent of other projects as possible. And in addition to that, though, we were simply really excited. I mean, the gentleman that I worked with at the time, he and I are huge sports fans. And while I have a professional leaning towards football and a collegiate allegiance towards football, I still love baseball. And we both love every sport. So that passion was something that made it pretty, it supported a lot of our energy that we needed, because naming, branding, and creating a mark that has a legacy to it is not an easy task.
So not only was this the first minor league baseball brand that Sky Design had created, but it was replacing a brand. It's in a city with a storied baseball tradition, replacing a brand that, the Fort Wayne Wizards.
Yep.
While the name itself wasn't inspired, right? Like, it just comes from the alliteration. And we're going to talk about that later in this episode with Logan Wiening. But the fact of going into a market that has a deep tradition of baseball in a lot of different ways, and to create a new brand, especially when it's your first one in this, in this field in specific, that must have also been something of a challenge for you.
Absolutely. I mean, we by no means were ignorant of the fact that we don't live there. We came from different regions of the United States, and then of course both live within the Atlanta area and had for a while. And I do think that our own personal history and recognition of how different regional fan bases have personalities and culture, that awareness certainly supported our efforts to make sure that this was an embraceable brand and mark and appearance to the design. And we also just knew in general that there had to be a name, and there had to be a story, and there had to be some kinship and connection that people didn't just like once. They needed to feel as if they could have a mark that people could recognize in other cities and have, maybe a special wave or a special saying, but certainly something where it immediately did connect back to that city and back to that region.
Absolutely. Well, and so you referenced the process, you referenced the fact that you all as designers were coming from different parts of the country. What was the process? Did you go learn about Johnny Appleseed? Did you visit Fort Wayne? Did you delve, into that history to start the process of creating this brand?
Absolutely. And we were lucky to be asked to create naming possibilities. So it didn't start with just them saying, hey, this is going to be the Fort Wayne TinCaps, come up with something for it. We were part of, and I won't share the names, but we were part with a very long naming process of what could replace the Fort Wayne Wizards. Because I think if there was any definite, it was, we're probably not keeping the Fort Wayne Wizards. So what would it be? What could the names be? What really captures all of the things we talked about, right? A history, a kinship, a connection, a legacy that starts from day one and continues theoretically forever. And how do we move that forward? So you're right. We did a ton of research about Fort Wayne, about Indiana, about previous team names, because I think that's always a consideration. Is there something that we can return back to current day? And then as we shortlisted the names, we started to come up with possibilities for how it would be represented. I think even from when we did head towards the Fort Wayne TinCaps, there were considerations of, all right, well, the primary mark might look like an apple with a Johnny Appleseed, tin cap on its head, but what would the secondary marks look like, and how strong are those? Can they be, does somebody want to purchase it? Because as we know, MLB's success often is dictated by the revenue that's generated by the materials and the merchandise. And through that process of our short list of names and how does it get represented and is there depth to it, we landed on the TinCaps because it just continues to get built. You could have different types of apples. You could have different family members of the TinCap. You could have different names for the TinCaps. And, there's MILB, if there's anything that was reinforced through our process, is that it is a sport and a section of that sport that is theoretically appealing to everybody, from the grandparents to the kids to the parents. Everybody wants to be there and everybody wants to wear that apparel, and it's fun, and that's a big part too.
I think a lot of minor league baseball teams, to be honest, are as much fashion brands as they are, actual sports teams, especially in a version of the sport where the team doesn't control who its players are, right?
Absolutely.
I mean,
Absolutely.
So right. You have to focus on the family entertainment aspect of it.
Mm-hmm.
This brand in particular is fun for me because I know there's all sorts of concession possibilities. I don't know if it's there.
Oh, yeah.
I don't actually recall seeing this when I was there. I was there this past summer as part of my Baseball Palooza road trip that I take with college buddies. They had a concession item that was like a giant helmet with like several apples and a bunch of ice cream and like whipped cream and rainbow jimmies on it. And it was like this monstrosity of like an ice cream apple thing. So
that sounds amazing.
Yeah, I did just get like the regular ice cream helmet, and I have to tell you, the logo looks great on an ice cream helmet. The green and red. I mean, this is sort of a funny thing, right? Like my background's in graphic design as well. Part of what I do is my full-time gig. Using red and green in a logo, I have used like lime green and sort of like a dark red before. I've used different reds and greens, and people always just say, it's Christmas. Any red, any green, yep. People see Christmas. I haven't heard that ever said about this brand. The fact that it's red and green, no one has ever said Christmas about it to me. I think this is why you see blue and orange, right? Like it's not associated with a holiday. Was that something that you talked about? Is that color combination something where you're like, are we going to get this?
I think that, and you probably recognize this as a graphic designer, you have to have that awareness as you put colors together that there's going to be something conveyed or a connotation that's a possibility. But honestly, and I'm racking my brain and dusting the dust off, that there wasn't a huge concern over this feeling like Christmas. And I think a lot of that had to do with the evolution of the design process of it being so, and we did look at other colors for the apple to be.
Yeah.
I don't think it was because of Christmas, but it was really just part of the development. But it just feels natural. And, the green that was chosen, the dark sort of hunter green, it's a very baseball color, right? It's the traditional sort of steel trusses and feeling of a historic stadium. And it feels baseball. So when you combine that with the red of an apple that already has a green leaf to some degree, it just doesn't have, I don't think the mind immediately goes there. And so as we built the brand, there absolutely was a balance that we had to have with how, what percentage of each color was utilized and how does that, what is the strategy for certain types of applications. But I don't know, the colors just evolved and they just felt very good together.
They do. I'm wearing the hat right now, and I just, it very quickly became one of my favorite caps after I bought it. These minor league baseball teams, they all do these food-based alternate identities, and you guys are already a food-based identity here. So this logo, it was unveiled in 2009. It has stood the test of time. It doesn't seem like it's going away anytime soon. The minor league baseball landscape has shifted dramatically, the logo landscape, the visual landscape. What do you attribute its longevity to?
I just think it's embraceable. It's an identity that is, and I will say that we worked hard on making it embraceable. There were many iterations of what that face would look like. And we had a lot of conversations about what is a mark that feels like it has a little bit of feistiness, but it doesn't feel unapproachable. We talked a lot about the difference between major and minor league baseball and, professional and minor league. And we wanted to ensure that it's not so aggressive that it is it doesn't carry a lot of tense feelings. It really needed to convey fun more than aggression.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's helped. And certainly I think stylistically, we created a system that could be easily applied in many different forms and on many different materials. We worked hard at checking ourselves with what we created. And then the other aspect to it is that it just has a depth to it that, as we've talked a little bit about already, you can sort of separate the cap from the apple and use that on its own. You have the history of Johnny Appleseed. You have just the idea of apples in general. You have the little grimace on the face that could be shifted digitally if it needed to be. So there's a personality and a character to it. And we wanted to make sure that it had character traits that you wanted to know, but didn't feel so cartoony that we were, dismissing the intelligence of the fan base either.
Absolutely. You know what? I really want to see the team someday have a hat that actually looks like, not actually metal, but like that looks like the tin cap that the Apple is wearing. I'd love to see the team.
There is, that would be amazing. There used to be a foam one that you could buy the backwards cap, and there was a big foam one.
That makes sense.
They had that on opening day, and that was really cool to see, like a bunch of kids with these foam tin caps. But it'd be fun to translate that into a batter's helmet one day, just to see what would happen.
Well, Tiffany, this has been so much fun. I really appreciate you coming on and talking about the tin caps and the work that you all do in minor league baseball. Where can people find Sky Design?
Well, thanks for having me. Paul, it's been great. Good reliving some of these thoughts in the process. People can find Sky at skydesigngraphics.com. That has our information. It has my information if anyone wants to get in touch with me. And we're on Instagram, and that handle is on the website as well.
Fantastic. Tiffany, thank you so much. This has been such a pleasure to get to meet you and talk about your work in minor league baseball.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks for having me.
All right, everyone, welcome back. This is really fun for me. I get to talk right now with a gentleman who I met the day after I went to my first Fort Wayne TinCaps game, Logan Wiening with the Old Fort Baseball Company, which is of note because Logan grew up going to Fort Wayne Wizards games. And so we actually went out for a run the day after I went to the TinCaps game. If I understand, you were at a bachelor party, so you couldn't join us for the actual game. All right. But we had a great time out running the following day and got to chatting. And you were talking about growing up with the Wizards. I see that you're wearing a Wizards cap right now, which I love. So I definitely want to talk about the Old Fort Baseball Company, which is based in Fort Wayne, Indiana. Mm-hmm. Before we get to that, let's talk about the Wizards, because everyone, so far in this episode, we've just sort of been discounting the Wizards as, a team that there was alliteration between Fort Wayne and the word Wizards. So what did that brand mean to you growing up with that team?
Yeah, like you said, it does kind of just fall with the alliteration. But for me, that was baseball in my childhood in Fort Wayne. When I grew up as somebody who was a crazy baseball fan, grew up, a insane Cubs fan, still am. But as far as seeing games in person, it was going to Wizards games at Memorial Stadium. And, I didn't know any different. That wasn't, at the time, the stadium was good. And for me as a little kid, it was an awesome experience anytime I got to see live baseball. My dad always jokes that, his friends and people he worked with were shocked that I had never been to the kids area at the field because you went and I was there to watch baseball. And that was just what it was. So it definitely has the nostalgia element for me as a baseball fan.
So I know that they had a couple of different logos. They had one that was, I guess the most recent one was like a dragon with a baseball bat. But then there was also one that was actually a wizard himself, looks like Gandalf or whatever, right? Yeah. Like it was sort of a wizardy looking character. First of all, this team, the Wizards, they played from 93 to 2008. which as I see those dates, I noticed that it bookends the Phillies National League titles.
There you go.
They went from 93 to 2008 without winning the National League. So those are both dates for me as a Phillies fan that are important. But so that team was around for 16 seasons.
Mm-hmm.
Was there a particular brand that you preferred? Was there, did you have a lot of gear from the teams?
Yeah, I think for me at the time while it was going on, they switched to the Dragon logo, probably, I forget what year, but that's what I remember the most going to.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what I associate with seeing the team. I had things, I have old posters, I have some baseballs and stuff with both on them, kind of probably buried at my parents' house somewhere. The main thing I always remember with the original, his name was Wayne the Wizard, the very original, Wayne Fort Wayne, but was apparently the first game I ever went to. I was like 3 years old, and the mascot, comes up to say hi because it was a little kid, and I was not into it and was terrified. Because it was, when you look back, like you said, kind of Gandalf looking, kind of creepy. Yeah. So to a 3-year-old who'd never seen a mascot before, was not the most settling of characters. But no, so now, I kind of look back at that original one, and that's what I like the most, just because it's the more retro looking, like cool 90s baseball logo.
It's actually, in that context now, it is actually kind of great, right? Like he's holding a baseball like it's a crystal ball, and he's got the sort of traditional wizard cap with the stars and the moons on it. And so I think if you could find that now, you could wear it around and people wouldn't know if you were wearing it ironically or not, right? Like it's like just cool enough that maybe it's ironic and maybe it's not. So the TinCaps will bust that out every maybe 5 or so years, and they'll sell out of it immediately, because it goes so fast. So it's very cool. Definitely the Wizard's better than the Dragon. The Dragon just looks like it's it's from a kid's TV show, I think. So your company, Old Fort Baseball, you're more than just a guy who went to Wizards games as a kid, right? Like you have you founded this organization, this company, Old Fort Baseball Company, that delves into the history of baseball sort of at large. But I know that you have a focus on Fort Wayne because you grew up there. I know you went away for a little bit and then you came back. So can you talk about sort of what you do with the history of baseball as it pertains to Fort Wayne, Indiana?
Yeah. So, growing up here as a baseball fan, and I've always had a keen eye towards local sports. I've always gone to, whether it was arena football games, basketball games, Wizards games, TinCaps games, any sport that's played in Fort Wayne, I've probably attended multiple games. But I was always looking into kind of the history and the past of what did exist and all of that. I remember, I think it was 7th or 8th grade, we had to, write your first real big research paper in school. And I wrote it on the history of baseball in Fort Wayne, and really dug back into all of the teams that had existed. The first professional baseball game was played here in 1871. You've got the Daisies, who, people know a decent amount about just because of A League of Their Own and the impact that it had here. But then the amount of players, major league, minor league, whatever, that have come from Fort Wayne, but you don't see much of that around in Fort Wayne. You go to other cities, you see a lot of that kind of heritage stuff from older teams and the older things in the community. And from a sports perspective, it's just not something I saw in the community here. And I really saw that as an opportunity to kind of bring that and celebrate that to the community here.
And on your website, you have a handful of collections, in that you mentioned the Fort Wayne Daisies. That was an All-American professional girls baseball team that played, alongside the Rockford Peaches. I kind of wish that this new TV show that is on, what is it, Amazon Prime? It's on. I kind of wish that had followed a different team besides the Peaches, right? Like we got the story of the Peaches already. And so it would have been interesting to highlight a team like the Daisies, right? That would have brought some nice attention to another team.
Yeah, definitely. I think, they're sticking with what people are familiar with, but I think there is a lot of opportunity in both the movie and the show where they could have kind of given some more recognition and some more notoriety to the other teams in the league and the other cities in the Midwest here that really played an important part in kind of the history and the landscape of baseball in this country.
Sure. I was impressed with, you sort of rattled off a handful of things there about Fort Wayne in particular, and its bona fides as a baseball town, right? Like, in the first professional game taking place there in 1871 is a great fact, right? And it was one of the stops on our baseball palooza tour, and that's where you and I got the chance to meet briefly. We went for a real nice run along the river there and the train tracks. But it was interesting for me to hear about all the history in Fort Wayne. And it's one of my favorite things about, the Baseball Palooza road trip is every year I get to sort of learn about a different part of the country. The existing team that's there now is the TinCaps. Obviously, we've talked on this episode already about the history behind that logo and nickname, but just the ballpark itself is super nice, right? Like, it was a beautiful setting for a game, and it's a fun brand. I like the brand, and it represents the existing era of baseball in Fort Wayne pretty well. What's your relationship with the TinCaps?
It's a great, like you said, it's a great stadium. It's a great brand. When that stadium opened, it was such a kind of bolt of energy into Fort Wayne as a whole, but into downtown Fort Wayne. So it opened, I think I was in 7th grade when the stadium opened.
Yeah.
So, I went to a ton of games just because it was so incredible, and it was so state of the art at the time. And it's still an amazing stadium, but now you've seen so many stadiums very similar, open up. But at the time, it was so different than what we were used to with the old kind of concrete block stadium.
Yeah.
So I've always been going to games ever since I got a driver's license. I would go to games by myself, just kind of walk around, take in the game, whatever.
Yeah.
But then I started working for the Mad Ants, the D-League team, basketball team here in town.
Yeah.
So I've really gotten to know a lot of the staff over there, just because it's the size of Fort Wayne, it's a big city, but there's a lot of crossover within the sports industry, especially where we've got people that work each other's games as far as game day staff and stuff. I've had to be the mascot for Johnny TinCaps' birthday party before.
Awesome.
Things like that. So I've really grown to know a lot of the people there, and it's a great organization, and it's just a great asset to the community for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned the Mad Ants, named for General Mad Anthony Wayne. And I know that because when I was 16, I worked at the Anthony Wayne movie theater in Wayne, Pennsylvania. Oh, wow. So it's I also grew up in a town named for Anthony Wayne, who was not a good person, by the way.
Not necessarily.
That is lost to history in some ways.
Yes.
But, well, it was such a treat to get to meet you and to talk about that Wizards team. And it was funny because I had already conducted a couple of the interviews that are going to be on this episode. I don't know. I think your affinity for the Wizards was, I really enjoyed that because it's like, it was part of your community. It's part of your childhood. And before I let you go, I'll ask you this. Was it disappointing to you when they changed their nickname? Did you find that you were going to miss the Wizards?
I don't think at the time it was the same thing that, you always talk about with the Brandeis guys, the J curve situation, right. Where, people were so kind of blown away by why do we have this apple with a tin pot on his head?
Right.
I think I was very open to it. And honestly, the second me and my dad went when they held an open house at the stadium, like a few weeks before opening day. And the second we walked around the stadium and saw how they incorporated the branding into the facility, I think we were bought in. You saw the concession stands all had apple themed names, and the store was the Orchard, and the way that they built the stadium using the brand, I think we were bought in at that point. It just seemed, you knew it was done with a purpose and it wasn't just some silly name. So I think I didn't really have an issue with it. I think it was really exciting.
Awesome. Well, people can find you on oldfortbaseballco.com, and it's fun to noodle around the work that you've done there. I particularly enjoy, by the way, the Ballpark Hunter, Mark Viquez's podcast, Ballpark Hunter. You created a new logo for him, and I always enjoy that logo when it pops up on my podcast feed, and so it's nice to chat with you. Since I've seen your work out there in the world, it's nice to actually get to know you and talk to you. And everyone should go check out oldfortbaseballco.com. And then where else can people find you on social media?
Instagram, Twitter, Facebook at Old Fort Baseball Co.
It's easy. Brand synergy. Nice job by you there. Awesome. Well, Logan Wiening, thank you so much. I appreciate you coming on and chatting. And hopefully we'll get to go for a run in another baseball city, or maybe even go to a baseball game. Oh, I have to mention, the ice cream helmets that they served at the TinCaps game were massive and awesome. It was hard ice cream, and it was like one little ice cream helmet. It was sort of hard for me to finish. Like, it took me a while to get through it. So that was,
they knew you were coming. They prepared.
I guess so. That is an enduring memory of that ballpark. In addition to all the other amenities, the open concourse and the great view and the nice seating, it's the awesome helmet Sundays. So awesome. Logan, thanks so much, and look forward to talking to you soon.
Yeah, thanks, Paul.
All right, everyone, welcome back. This is super exciting for me because, I love to delve into these subject matters, where these logos and nicknames come from. And so right now, I'm very, very happy to be joined by Bob Dispenza, who is the Park and Education Manager with Allen County Parks in Fort Wayne, Indiana. Bob is a history interpreter and is an educator about history and lives in Fort Wayne. And so Bob is the perfect person to come on and talk about the history of John Chapman. So Bob, I'll jump right in. First of all, thank you for being here.
You're welcome.
Could you give us just sort of a 30,000 foot view history of who is John Chapman? What is the legend of Johnny Appleseed?
He was born out east and adopted the Swedenborgian religion, part of which one of the tenets is apparently the more deprivation you suffer in this life, the less you'll have in the next. And so he was never afraid to get out there in the cold barefoot and do what he thought he needed to do. And he took an apprenticeship with an orchardist back east. And that's where he kind of got the idea about planting trees. And then he spent the rest of his life traveling around the frontier at that point, Ohio and Indiana and places like that, and planting trees and talking about his religion and in general, making himself a local character for as long as he stayed around there. He ended up owning quite a bit of land in various states. And here in Allen County, he owned several plots that he used for planting orchards. The end of his life apparently happened here, though there was some dispute about that. But in 1916, a group of the local folks got together to put an iron fence around his grave, which was on the old Woods farm. And some people who were there at the time at the 1916 dedication were at the funeral. So they were, the folks here said there's really no reason for them to mistake the location of his grave because they were there at the funeral. So there is a place called Johnny Appleseed Park here where he is buried, and there's an iron fence around it and a little stone marker. And here's where he met his end and got recycled.
So in your role with Allen County Parks, do you find that this is a subject that comes up a lot in this part of Indiana?
Occasionally, not as much as you think. And, when the TinCaps became more popular, more people delved into his history. But some of the land he owned along the Maumee River for his orchards, one of which I think was part of what was once an Allen County park, Maumee Gateway, which is down along the river towards the Ohio line. And so there are still some plots of land out there that he owned that if you looked hard enough, you might find a few traces of apple trees. And we have one here planted on this property, which came from Lima, Ohio, which is supposedly a descendant of one of the ones he planted there. And it's got apples on it this year.
Ah, very cool. Very cool. So the distinction obviously between John Chapman, the human being, and this legend of Johnny Appleseed, do you find that there are people who come to you not even knowing that John Chapman was a real person, that it isn't just a sort of Paul Bunyan style myth?
Occasionally, yeah. There are folks that think he's just one of those American frontier myths that was kind of spontaneously generated by folks out on the frontier, but he was quite a real person. And, they actually have a mascot who they call Johnny, who is kind of in a full bodysuit and it's got his usual little tin cap on his head, and who makes appearances all around the area. And the team is very popular, and Parkview Field is a very nice field. I have been to one of the games there once.
Well, you are wearing a Fort Wayne TinCaps cap right now. It features an apple, and then the apple himself is wearing a metal pot as a hat. Is this something that John Chapman actually did? Would that have been actually common in the time to wear a pot as a cap?
Not common in the time, but he did, because some of the accounts that were written while he was still alive said he had this contraption on his head that he used as a hat and as a cooking pot. So, this is as close as we're going to get. And when the team first moved here and things started moving for that, a lot of the wags said, "Oh, so tin caps, isn't that the same as potheads?"
I didn't think about that. That's funny. I would like to see the team itself actually wear metal caps one day on the field. I wonder how that would be received. How long have you been in Fort Wayne?
Since the fall of 2001.
Okay, so you were there in 2009 when the team switched from the Fort Wayne Wizards to the Fort Wayne TinCaps. What was the reaction? Did people embrace it as part of the local lore?
Well, they didn't mind so much that it was Johnny Appleseed. Some people took objection to the depiction, and some people took objection to the amount of money being spent on the field. Because I was actually at a Wizards game, and that was kind of a big concrete stadium erected in the middle of the Memorial Coliseum's parking lot. And that's gone now, and now the Coliseum has more parking. But the field is downtown, which some people thought, we're tearing down things downtown to build a field. But as it turns out, it's been very popular. A lot of people go to it. It's kind of like the thing to do in the evenings in the summer. And they tend to have a lot of fireworks, which get people interested. And the team's done pretty well on and off. So,
you mentioned the Wizards, and we were talking about this in the previous segment, that the Fort Wayne Wizards, that nickname sort of came from just the fact that Wizards had alliteration with Fort Wayne. Is there, as a longtime resident of the area, is there any other connection that you can think of that Wizards would have with Fort Wayne?
Not particularly. I mean, we have a little Comic-Con that happens here.
Oh, okay.
People get together and do things, but I don't think that has anything to do with that.
Bob, just I really appreciate you coming on and using your heritage interpretation knowledge and your knowledge of the area and your role with Allen County Parks to talk about the real John Chapman and the legend of Johnny Appleseed and this very interesting brand for this team. Thanks very much for coming on.
You're welcome.
Is there somewhere where people can follow Allen County Parks or the work that you do online?
No, we have an Allen County Parks website, allencountyparks.org, so it's easy to get to.
I appreciate you doing this, Bob. It's been fun. All right, take care.